Because the word Hamas is in the Bible. The word Hamas is in the Bible 44 times. And the biblical definition is violence, cruelty, and injustice. Now, Vic had given me a book on Islam, and he made me promise that. Now, I cheated a little bit because I listened to the audio instead of reading it. I'm not a good reader. So I don't know if that really counts as keeping my promise or not, but I get a lot of stuff sent to read, and I don't get to read it all. But something the subject, and it had to do with Hamas. And when God wants me to pay attention to something, he just keeps sending it and sending it and sending it and sending it. And so it intrigued me to go a little bit deeper. Hamas, violence, the spirit of Hamas, has been around since Genesis. And we're going to take a look at that. We know that the Bible says we wrestle not with flesh and blood, right? Spirits don't die. Spirits are an entity that either occupies or influences a person. When that person dies, that spirit just moves on to a new person. That's why the spirits, we prayed for a man in Dominican Republic last week who had multiple demons. Those demons have been around since before Christ. They just happened to be occupying this particular man. And it was pretty classic. You know, the guy's laying on the ground and he's throwing up and he's thrashing back and forth and going. And it took multiple people, probably about 30 minutes, to get him fully delivered. Now, they probably just went on to go occupy somebody else. And if he doesn't clean up his act, they'll come back and occupy him as well. But that's how demons work. Okay? They're entities, and they're looking for a body to occupy. There is a spirit of Hamas, and it is violence, it is cruelty, and it has certain characteristics. Namely, the murder of innocent children and babies. When Abraham and Sarah decided that they were no longer willing to wait for the promise of God, and they took matters into their own hands, Abraham had relations with Hagar. The descendants of Ishmael still live today. If you go back and you look at the peoples that occupied Gaza, where the terrorists are, you know what in biblical history, the nation that occupied that territory the most? The Philistines. That spirit has been over Gaza for centuries. Centuries. Goliath came from Gaza. God has really been bringing this whole situation to the forefront. So what happened was Vic gave me this book. I started to read the book. Then I found another book. And we were coming back from Dominican Republic, and we passing through Miami. And we're online to go through customs. And there's a man in front of me, in front of our group, with a yarmulke on, obviously Jewish. So we started up a conversation. Turns out he's an author, and he had just written a book called The New Hamas. He was in the Dominican Republic to help generate support for Israel. He was meeting with the ambassador. He was doing rallies. And it turns out he does this for the Israeli government all over the world. So I Googled him, and turns out he's a Messianic Jew, believes in Jesus, works for the Israeli government. So it was a long line, so we had good time for some questions and so on. And he says, I don't understand your government. He says, you're telling us to stop this war. We've been doing this for centuries. Between their hatred for the Jews. And it's all driven by this spirit of Hamas, which is the spirit of murder, the spirit of injustice. He says, and your government is telling us to stop fighting, putting a lot of pressure on Israel to stop fighting when there will never be any peace. As he was talking about this, I don't know if you're familiar with it, the two-state solution. In other words, they can have their country and we'll have our country. The devil is never satisfied. You can't negotiate. Israel has a saying, you can't negotiate with terrorists. You can't negotiate with the devil. Their mission is death to Israel and death to Christians. I jokingly said this because Gaza is right on the Mediterranean. They got beachfront property. Why not, they don't create anything. Why not build, make it look like Miami? Put a bunch of hotels and condos on the oceanfront, make a lot of money, enjoy the piece of land that you have. But they're not satisfied. They want Israel territory as well. They're not satisfied with what they have. The devil's never satisfied, period. In the couple of books that I read, which is really, this is different from me because when it came to end time prophecies and return of Christ and so on, I never took a deep dive into that. I'm not saying that's wrong or right or whatever. I probably should have been a better student of that. But my philosophy was, I'm so busy staying busy. When it comes to that time when I'm supposed to know about that, God will put that on my heart to pay closer attention to it. Because I was more of the, no, I don't want to be a scholar. I want to serve. That's what I do, and that occupies most of my time. But that just changed. God has impressed upon me, I want you to focus on this more. And it didn't hit me until, what's my most famous saying? You can't make this up? There's thousands of people in Miami airport. Thousands of people. And I just happened to be standing in line with an expert on Hamas. I'm just shaking my head. I'm just shaking my head. And it was not filtered through any kind of media. This is a guy that's on the front lines. And we were giving our condolences for what happened in October in Israel. Like, okay, this isn't just a war. He's saying, this is exactly what only a few people are saying. He says, the people in Palestine, they're shields. They will take the this is that spirit of Hamas. Okay, they will take little kids and put their military installations in schools and hospitals and allow them to be killed so that they can get on the news and say Israel did this. And that's coming from a guy who lives there. That's not coming from ABC or CBS or MSNBC. That's coming from a guy who lives there and knows exactly what's going on. He knows exactly what's going on. And he does this because the U.S. has turned their back on them. He's now going all over the world, country to country, sitting down with politicians, telling that story, and getting people to pay attention. Islam and the Antichrist, if you want to take a note, Islam and the Antichrist is the name of one of these books. It's by a guy named Joel Richardson. And you don't have to buy the book. You can just get it off YouTube and listen to the copy of the book. You can also listen to some of the interviews that he's done. And he has a theory, and this was the whole gist of it, that the Antichrist will come from Islam. And he goes through scripture after scripture after scripture, because we've seen the movies, and Tim LaHaye did the movies Left Behind, and in his portrayal, the Antichrist was from Romania or something like that, Europe. My pastor in Orlando, he's probably about 10 years older than me, 12 years older than me. And he said he remembered in grammar school his teacher saying, when it comes to end times, keep your eyes on the nation of Israel. That's the clock. Not Europe and Russia and this one and that one and China and all this such. No. Keep your eyes on Israel. That's the clock. Yeah, it's called Islam and the Antichrist. Joel Richardson is the guy's name. If you see this spirit, what he's calling the spirit of Hamas, it's coming out of, okay, so start with Ishmael, okay? He was not the promised one. He was not the promised son. So you have descendants years later coming from that same place. Okay? You have Jacob and Esau. Okay? Herod. You know who Herod's lineage comes from? Edomites. Comes from Esau. So you have these, quote, fathers of this violence with that Hamas spirit that comes to destroy, kill. It's demonic, okay? Because Satan, what does the Bible say about Satan? It's kill, steal, and destroy. That's what they do. It's like nobody works for a living in those countries because they live, their purpose in life is to steal, kill, and destroy. And what the enemy has done in this country has sold us on the fact that we need to be tolerant. We need to be tolerant because that's the decent thing to do. Fine. I'm going to just throw in some Bible here to make sure I'm on the right track. Okay? Let's go find, I think it's in Judges. Othniel. Yeah, right. The story right after Othniel. I want to go there. Let's see, where is that? Judges, let's go to Judges 3:11. You know, I talked about the gal that stuck the tent peg through the other guy's head, the evil king's head. And okay. But there's a short story that's kind of cool. Ehud. Okay, Judges 3:12. Part of Israel's problem is that, and this is part of our problem, is that they tolerated evil. They did not completely take over the promised land because what you tolerate, you become. And that was their downfall. They tolerated it, and it became their downfall. So this is kind of a very unpreached story, but I think it deserves some credit. And the children of Israel, again, did evil in the sight of the Lord. Why did they do evil in the sight of the Lord? Because they didn't cut it off. They didn't end it and just put an end to it. They tolerated it. So the Lord strengthened Eglon, king of Moab, against Israel because they had done evil in the sight of the Lord. Then he gathered together himself the people of Ammon and Amalek and went to defeated Israel and took possession of the city of the palms. So the children of Israel served Eglon, king of Moab, for 18 years. In this country, we're serving this spirit of Hamas because we tolerate it. Crime out of control. Politics out of control. I pulled this out. I probably won't preach on it. But anyway, I've been up to Mission Hospital a couple times in the last month or so, a few times for different people. Mission Hospital has until February 24th to fix its deficiencies or lose Medicare and Medicaid funding. You can put your trust in them. And then it goes on later in the article to talk about the billions that they have made. They've already way covered the cost of what it costs to buy Mission Hospital. And oh, by the way, where did that money go? Mission Hospital was a nonprofit. HCA paid to buy them. Where did that money go? Where'd that money go? Nobody's talking about that. But anyway, just another one of those mountains that has been taken over for the sake of the money god. Okay, so this is typical of Israel. You know, they compromise, they fall into sin, then they cry out to the Lord. This is the whole book of Judges, right? Just different judges. And God delivers them, then they get back into a mess again. So this is that part. But when the children of Israel cried to the Lord raised up a deliverer for them, Ehud, the son of Gera, the Benjaminite, a left-handed, this is for you, Shelley, a left-handed man, by him, wait, another left-handed, and you're gonna see a part of when we went through the blood covenant, why that left-handed thing is important. It's very important. Anyway, see, I could go to the same stories all the time that illustrate a certain point, but I like to go to the ones that nobody else goes to, just to a couple of reasons: give them credit, but then also add a little different spin on things. A left-handed man. By him, the children of Israel sent tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. So, when Israel is in captivity, they have to pay tribute or taxes to the people that took them over. Right? That's part of the punishment. They don't want to. Most of the time, when they took over people, it wasn't just to kill them all, although that is a spirit of Hamas, but a lot of times it was to extract money from them and make them subservient, make them the tail instead of the head. And God said you're supposed to be the head, not the tail. All right? So they picked this guy to go bring the tax money to this evil king. By him, the children of Israel sent tribute, taxes, to Eglon, king of Moab. Now Ehud made himself a dagger, a double-edged sword, but take note of that was a cubit in length. So he made himself a sword about 18 inches long. And fastened it under his clothes on his right thigh. This is very prophetic, and we'll pick that apart. When Jesus returns, what's it written on his right thigh? King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Okay, so he's left-handed, and so it's over here. So he brought tribute to the king. He's just a wise dude. He brought tribute to the Eglon, the king of Moab. Now Eglon was a very big man. And when he had finished presenting the tribute, he sent away the people who carried the tribute. So you're talking about, there's so much money they have to give this guy. It takes a team of people to carry it. That's a heavy tax burden. But he himself, when he had finished presenting the tribute, he sent away the people that helped carry it. But he himself turned back from the stone images that were in Gilgal, that's a whole other story, and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. And he said, keep silence. And all who attended him went out for him. So he tells the king, who's surrounded by servants, he tells the king, I got a secret message for you. So the king sends all of his servants out of the room. So it's just Ehud and the king. Okay, he said, keep silence. And all who attended him went out from him. And Ehud came up to him. Now he was sitting upstairs in the cool of his private chamber. Then Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. So he arose from his seat. Then Ehud reached with his left hand and took the dagger from his right thigh and thrust it into his belly up to the hilt. In other words, this guy was so big that this 18-inch sword went all the way into him, up to the handle. Up to the handle. Then Ehud said, I have a message of God for you. He rose from his seat. reached with his left hand, took the dagger from the right thigh, and thrust it into his belly, even to the hilt, after the blade, and the belly closed over the blade, for he did not draw the dagger out of his belly, but his entrails came out. Then Ehud went out through the porch and shut the doors of that upper room behind him and locked them, and left the dead king there. Now, if you read between the lines in the Bible, you'll see that God has a unusual sense of humor. Okay? This is Bible, okay? Don't get grossed out. This is Bible. When he had gone out, Eglon's servants came to look, and to their surprise, the doors were locked of that upper room. So they said, he's probably attending to his needs in the cool chamber. Other translations say, he's using the bathroom. Okay? That's what his servant said. His king's doors are locked. He doesn't want anybody in there. He's on the pot, okay? He's probably, so this is a polite way of saying that. He's probably attending to his needs. So they waited until they were embarrassed. They waited so long. They said, something's going on. A long time. And he didn't have a newspaper with him either. Okay? This is Bible. What can I tell you? So they waited until they were embarrassed and still had not opened the doors of the upper room. Therefore they took the key and opened them, and there he was, their master, fallen dead on the floor. But Ehud escaped while they delayed, and passed beyond the stone images and escaped to Syria. And it goes on to say that all of Israel rose and defeated the Moabites. When leadership is weak, you compromise with your enemies. What have we been doing? What have we been doing for the last 4 years? We have been compromising. Now, I'm not talking literally, because we wrestle not with flesh and blood, so our enemies, our physical people that are our enemies, our influences are influenced by this spirit of Hamas. So don't misunderstand me advocating physical violence. But this guy took action. There's no compromise in that. There is no compromise in that. In other words, sin had to be put to death. Not wounded, not banished, not put in jail. Sin had to die, period. No exceptions. It's very graphic, sticks the sword in him. 18 inches, this is a big dude, okay? Just like the other one I was talking about in the book of Deborah, where the girl took the tent peg, drove it through his head. Done, finished. Compromise will get you nowhere. And that's what we're doing. We're doing that as a nation. We're doing that as a church. The church is compromising every single day. Oh, well, we don't want to be exclusive. We don't want to offend people. Okay? No. Everybody's, you're welcome, and you can bring your sin with you, and it can stay here too. Because we don't want to offend you. It weakened the nation. It's true in homes. It's true in cities. I was saying before when we were having coffee, I was in Dominican Republic. It's now, I just looked, it's the 5th year I've been going to Dominican. And one of the leaders who's preached here, Pastor Nunez, is always concerned about us when we're there. Our interpreter is an ex-catcher for the Yankees. He's a big dude. His name is Friendy. Weird, but his name is Friendy, and he's a big dude. So Pastor Nunez always, when we go to if we want to go to the store or something, make sure you take Friendy with you. Make sure, because it's dangerous here. It's dangerous here. I've yet to see anything on the streets. I've never seen a crime there yet, even though all the homes have bars and they keep saying it's dangerous and all that. I never feel that. When Nunez isn't looking, I'll walk down the street by myself without him around. But he's always so paranoid about it. Never see anything. Plenty of police around. One guy came to the hotel, and I think he was selling weed. And like instantly, there was a cop there, and went over to him. I said that on this last trip, I was sitting in the car by myself, and the window was down. And a young man came over the side of the car, and he just looks at me, and he goes, first he was asking me for money in Spanish, and I knew what he was saying, but I just said, no comprendo. So then he turned around and says, money, give me money. He went right to English. And I says, I don't know about this. I just said, no. He just turned and walked away. I was expecting, the guy got a gun, he's got a knife, I'm American, he's going to come after me. No, he just walked away. That's the closest of any kind of crime I've seen in all the times that I've been there. I see more crime in downtown Asheville, more drugs in downtown Asheville than I've ever seen in that country. There's a couple of good interviews by Tucker Carlson that are worth your time to watch. And one he talks about, he does the interview with Putin in Russia, and then there's another one where he gets in, which is the best one, where he's speaking at the World Economic Forum. And he calls it out. Okay, he calls it out. All of these problems, direct result of poor leadership, weak leadership. Leaders that are afraid to call it like it is. And that's the result. We get, that's the result. There's also, and I'll post, I think I sent it to Shelley. Mark Driscoll, I was listening to this last night. He does a really good explanation of this spirit of Hamas and how if you don't deal with it, it will take you over. If you go to Judges, see, because I'm gonna put some of this blame, or all of this blame, on us as a church. Okay, us as a church. We are the ones who are supposed to step up to the plate. We are the ones that are supposed to get involved in the fight. And if there was ever, and I'm speaking generally for the American church, the people that call themselves Christians, okay? If there was ever a period of time that the church was in Laodicea, it is right now. Because this church is asleep at the wheel. The church is neither hot nor cold. It's just on autopilot. And the church has allowed the takeover of the schools, the takeover of every mountain, medical, education, all of it. We just sat back. Well, I'm just waiting for Jesus to come. I'm just waiting for Jesus to come back. There's a passage in Judges that Judges 2:3. Can somebody go there and read that for me? Judges 2:3. Yes. That is the result of not dealing head to head with the spirit of Hamas. That is the result of tolerating. They become thorns in our sides. Whether that's with crime, whether that's the frustration, and Christians will walk around and say, man, that's just, they shake their head. Man, that's terrible. What's happened to this country? Well, who's doing something about it? Who's doing anything? And I know when that question is asked, the most common response is, well, I'm just one person, what can I do? Well, if you go through the book of Judges, they were all one person. One Deborah, one Gideon, all one person. When you look in Hebrews at Faith's Hall of Fame, do you see like this army and that army? You see individual names. Individuals. Individuals who knew that they were nothing, but knew what the power of God could do through them. What was Gideon's first response? I'm the least. My family's the least. I'm the least. I'm a nobody. What can I do? And to paraphrase, what God is saying, greater is he that's in you than he is in the world. But we don't believe what the scripture says. We stay in the Gideon mindset of, well, I'm just one, I can't make a difference. The greatest turnarounds are initiated by one person. And the courage of one person can ignite a fire that brings the army. That brings the army. When we were in the Dominican, there's a lot of witchcraft there, but who cares? Who cares? Right? It's whatever. Oh my God, it's witchcraft. Who cares? For 2 nights in a row before the Crusades, this is a weird thing. And some of it amuses me. It really does. Because we knew that there were witches praying against what we were trying to do. So for 2 nights in a row, somewhere around between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, a pack of dogs congregated outside my hotel room and started going berserk. Howling and barking, and it had to be like 7 or 8 of them. And it lasted for 60 seconds. They just went absolutely bonkers. And I we get up the next morning and we're all sitting around having breakfast, and I said, man, how'd you sleep? I didn't sleep good because a pack of dogs was outside my room. Nobody else heard it. Nobody else heard it. I said, how could you not hear that? The second night, around the same time, the exact same thing happened. Pack of dogs, 7 or 8 of them at least outside the hotel room, and they all started at the same time, going crazy, and lasted 45 to 60 seconds, and then they stopped. So I believe that there was something going on. These witches or warlocks or whoever they were, because it's right on the Haiti border. Haiti is full of voodoo. A lot of them work in the Dominican Republic. Dominicans pretty solid in a lot of places in Christianity. Their roots are, we were in the city of San Juan, and there in the plaza in the center of the city were these letters about 10 feet tall, made out of ceramic tile that spanned from there to there, and it said, I think something like, Jesus is God over San Juan. You don't see that kind of stuff here, but there is a lot of witchcraft. And the second night, we made a whole bunch of changes into how we were doing the service, and we got the first night was kind of like a singer performer leading worship, which was like just absolutely flat. There was nothing going on. And so we got together and said, no, we're not doing that. Go get a youth group, put a youth group on stage, and we're going to start with real worship. The entire thing changed, completely changed. And little kids, 10, 12 years old, as well as some adults. When the altar call went out, the kids just flooded the stage. Completely different atmosphere. And so it's like, okay, big deal. Witchcraft, who cares? It's just enemies of blowhard. It's no big deal. But the second night, just absolutely amazing. Who's ever been on a mission trip? Is it life-changing? Yeah. Yeah, it's just, and it's even more amazing out of the country. Yeah, it's just your life priorities do a complete change. You'll never be the same. Well, if you're sick, you have to prepay the hospital. Okay? You could be bleeding on the sidewalk. If you do not have money, you don't go to the hospital. They will not accept you. Here, you go to emergency room, they'll take you. They have to take you. Down there, no. Exactly. Yeah. Either God heals you or you die. Okay, so that has a way of reinforcing your prayer life. Yeah. No choices. They don't have any choices. This other guy that we met, I'll give you his name. It was funny because we were standing there online, and I'm like, who is this guy? This is a pretty incredible interaction, chance meeting. So I Google him, and it takes me to Amazon, and there's all the lists of the books that he's written. And when I started reading through the background, I said, oh, he's a believer in Yeshua, based on the books that he's written. Itzhak Shapiro. Itzhak, Dr. Rabbi Itzhak Shapiro. And the book is called The New Hamas. See, so many of these enemies, you look at the enemies that Gideon fought and Deborah and Samson, they all came out of Gaza. And that area, I believe, if I'm correct, was the inheritance of Judah. When Joshua brought all the tribes in and divvied up the land and said, this is yours, so on, I believe that Gaza area was part of Judah, but they never conquered the enemies. And so they lost. They lost their inheritance. How many Christians have lost their inheritance because they compromised? Say that again. How many Christians have lost their inheritance because they compromised with the devil? When one of the last days that we were there in Dominican, I had an opportunity to speak to the local pastors. And when we got there, because there's downtime, the crusades are at night and you have time during the day, and we wanted to advertise, so we had a bunch of these little flyers to bring people out. And one of the guys, that was kind of his first trip there, and he said, "All right, we're going to go out and put some flyers out and get people to come to crusade." And I said, "Well, I know where I want to go. I want to go to the poorest neighborhoods I can find." So there's a big division of wealth there. This country's heading that way too, but there's no middle class. You're either poor or you're driving a Mercedes. Nowhere in between. I says, those people they're not interested. So I said, I want to go just walk the streets in the poorest neighborhoods I can find. So we're walking down the street, and in there's several really good situations. One of them, there's a young man, I'm going to guess maybe 20, sitting in a doorway and paralyzed on the whole right side. His hand is like into a claw. His toe on his right foot is the same way. It's all, atrophied. And I said, as I sit down and start praying for the guy. And things that here people don't want to do. He's smelly. He's drooling. I'm holding his hands, and he's drooling on, slobbering all over my hands. Stuff that people here don't want to mess with. And I got him to smile, and I'm praying for him. And I don't know, it was one of those where I said to the guy I was with, I said, this kid, and it's a reflection on their local churches, this kid could be sitting here for another 50 years, and nobody will ever come by and pray for him. Maybe, maybe not. So we went on, did our thing, and the next morning we were going to repeat that process and go into all the neighborhoods. And I said, well, I need to go back. And it's kind of a selfish thing, but I know that sometimes you pray for people and there is a turnaround that starts and the healing starts. But if you're in another country, you never get the opportunity to see that person again. And I've been asking the Lord that I can find somebody in that condition and see them get healed right in front of my eyes. All right, I want that. I really, really want that. And I've heard, like David Hogan describe that, where all of a sudden you see, fingers just popping, an instant healing. And I want that. And so I said the next morning, I says, I want to go back there. I want to go back and see if he's getting healed. I want to go back. I want that because that builds my faith, right? So we had a lot of other things to do. I said, no, I don't care what you do. I want 10 minutes, 10 minutes. I want to go back to the house. I want to see that kid. So we go back there, and he's not in the doorway. And I go over and knock on the door, and they said somebody had taken him in a wheelchair, taken him down to downtown. I was like, we were on a tight schedule. I'm not going to get back here. It's one of those, I'll never see this kid again, whatever. And I said, okay, well, he's not here. So we continue handing out the leaflets and praying for other people and so on. And we're walking through the downtown area of this little city, and there he is, in the middle of nowhere.